Welcome to World Insight, coming to you from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, it's been 3 years since China first proposed the idea of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB. It has now been up and running for over 9 months. We sit down for exclusive interviews with the AIIB president and senior staff to discuss what lies ahead for the organization. You're watching World Insight, raising new questions regarding new problems from new angles. That seems to be what AIIB, or Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, is determined to do. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang announced the AIIB initiative at the beginning of October 3 years ago during a visit to Southeast Asia. This multinational development bank has grown from an idea to an alluring entity. It has now been in operation over 9 months. World Insight has been given unprecedented media access to the organization for exclusive interviews with the senior management team at the office headquarters. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB, is a multilateral development bank that aims to support the building of infrastructure in the Asia-Pacific region. Its modus operandi will be lean, clean, and green. Jin Lichun is the president of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. His career has spanned from the Ministry of Finance from China to the Asian Development Bank, and China's Sovereign Wealth Fund China Investment Corp, and then China's first joint venture investment bank, China International Capital Corp. Many believe he has an impeccable leadership record in the public and private sectors and in multilateral development institutions. In 2014, Jin took on a new mission. As Secretary General of the Multilateral Interim Secretariat of AIIB, Jin and his team successfully convinced the 57 countries, both from developed and developing countries, to join the China-initiated Multilateral Development Bank, AIIB. AIIB started from an idea proposed by China, but as Mr. Jin put it, China has transformed itself over the years from merely a student to one that can make significant contributions to the international community.
We were students, we were learning, but as you may have noticed, our learning curve is very steep. So now, after more than 30 years, almost 40 years, of benefiting from the general support of the multilateral financial institutions, and after we have benefited from the bilateral support of all those countries, it's China's turn to contribute.
So how do you feel being the first president of this newly established regional development bank, which has already enormously attracted attention from all over the world?
I think sense of responsibility. It's great responsibility. And I think it's not my personal issue. It's not my personal matter. It's the matter of the People's Republic of China as the initiator of this bank, and it's related certainly to all of the 57 founding members. So my team and I work together to realize the dreams and the aspirations of the initiator of this bank. But as you know, all the borrowing developing countries are looking forward to us for support. So all of us have a high sense of responsibility, and we have to live up to the expectations of the shareholders, of the stakeholders, and all of the people who are expected to be benefited from the financing of this bank.
They would say, well, you used to work for the Chinese Ministry of Finance. You're also yourself a Communist Party member. So how are you going to make sure you're going to be impartial in your current position?
So I position myself as a worker, as a messenger, as a builder, okay? And I worked with all of the staff in the Chinese working group, in the multilateral interim secretariat, and now with the senior members and the staff of this bank. So what I have been trying to do is, first of all, to have very good understanding of the ideas, conceptualization of the Chinese leaders about the setting of this bank. And I should understand fully the expectations of all the other founding members. I think that is the very basis to serve in this institution. I'm very glad to see that very quickly the idea of setting up a new bank was embraced by all of the other founding members. Even though some countries missed the deadline of March the 31st, 2015, they did want to join. For some reasons, they couldn't finish or complete the process or procedure. So now we are having 28 countries which are firmly determined to join this bank. They will come here as the observers.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Certainly. Very short period of time, all of this.
Yes, I think it's a record.
It's record-breaking, I would say.
That's right.
Yeah. But on the other hand, how are your skills of serving in the Chinese government previously, and also as a good communicator, also with the Chinese side, be able to help you to do your job? That's also an interesting part. Many of our international viewers will be extremely interested in understanding.
I think you're very nice to me. You should have said, Mr. Jing, how can you reconcile your status in the Chinese government and being a Chinese Communist Party member with the task you are undertaking?
I'm so glad you have this cross-cultural understanding. Go ahead, so Mr. Jin.
Thank you for your consideration. But I make no bones about the fact. I was the Chinese senior officials. I served the Chinese government for 30 years. I am and will remain a Communist Party member of China. And I'm a Chinese national. So this is the fact, okay? Now I am international civil servant. How can I reconcile my status with 3 dimensions with this new responsibility? It's not actually difficult. I'm not unique. I'm not a special case. There are so many senior management members of the existing institutions. They were government employees, and with certainly their nationality. How they could do it? I also served as vice president of AIIB. My position is the same as all of the senior people in the existing institutions. We serve the institution. We are responsible for all of the shareholders. We cannot serve directly, exclusively your own country. That's not permissible.
But then, is it fair that you are getting extra scrutiny? Because when you look at World Bank or AIIB, yes, they're all coming from a certain country, and they have been serving in their respective governments, but people are not necessarily asking them the same question as people would ask you. So do you think it is fair that you are receiving this extra scrutiny?
I think...
I have to ask questions from both sides.
It's all right. It's all right. You can call this security clearance. Whether the international community or the shareholders believe you would be impartial in making your decisions as the leader of this institution. We cannot serve any country exclusively. We serve this institution, and this institution works in the interest of all the shareholders. That is your contribution. If you say, do I work for China? Of course, but in a different way.
I'm sure you have already closely looked into it. That is the possible competition among different kinds of regional and international development banks. Yes, indeed, we need 10 trillion US dollars for infrastructure building from now until a few years later. But still, most commercially viable projects, everybody wants to get their hands on it. The most social impact these projects could have, everybody would like to have those projects. So what do you make of the apparent increasing number of regional development banks that we're having today. Let me just throw you a few names. I'm sure you know this all better than everybody else. Of course, we got AIIB previously. There's World Bank, the Asia Development Bank. We also have the EU Development Bank coming from Russia. And also as SCO, they are trying to establish their own development bank and funding mechanisms, just to name a few. So what, European development banks as well. So what do you make of this gigantic number these days of the development banks? How is AIIB really going to be competitive? Particularly, you're a new kid on the block.
You know, when we invited the ASEAN countries and some other Asian countries to join, you know, what's the response? They say it's a great idea because our projects, infrastructure projects, are crying out for assistance. There was a little response. You know why? Because the financial capital, resources of the existing institutions could not meet their needs. Indeed, the outsiders normally overlook this very crucial aspect of shortage of funds. They only see there are big players in this world, so they must be fighting, which is not true. Infrastructure projects are normally very large in size. It's easy to go beyond $1 billion, yes. $2 billion, and it's not a very good idea for one institution to pour its resources in one and same project. That is why right after we were set up, or even before this bank was up and running, we had ideas from the World Bank and the EBRD, let's work together. Because they need this new bank to pour in some of the resources, we can work together. So I don't think actually this is really a problem. If there's any competition, I think it's how efficient we should be. Okay, it's not the projects which would probably snatch it away from some institution. We don't do that. Likewise, in the future, when we prepare some infrastructure projects on our own, we would invite World Bank, EBRD, AIIB, or some AIIB, some other institutions join us. So it's not really this thing.
Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has 37 regional and 20 non-regional prospective founding members, or PFM. All of them have signed the Articles of Agreement that form the legal basis for the bank. The pool of members seems to be growing. At the AIIB upcoming first annual meeting of the Board of Governors, 28 countries will also attend as observers. The AIIB has signed a non-binding memoranda of understanding with the Asian Development Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and the European Investment Bank. This has opened the door for future cooperation. In the half year since the AIIB was established, it has already been working on several infrastructure projects in developing Asian countries like Indonesia and Bangladesh. Since the early preparation stages, the AIIB has faced international scrutiny and tough queries, from which the senior management team has not shied away. Here comes the part. Many say it could be extremely challenging to communicate with a country like China.
I'm sorry, I have to correct you. I don't think a lot of people have difficulty communicating with China. Some people do, but not all of these people. So don't worry about that. I think when talking about communication, you have to be very sincere when you talk to people. You have to tell them the truth, your ideas, what's going on in your mind, in your heart, and what you really want to do. Okay, that is the very basis of communication. If you are open-minded, if you're transparent, and if you tell your mind to the people, even though those who are skeptics could eventually believe you.
There has been some media reports suggesting that the other founding members, permanent founding members of AIIB, particularly quote-unquote, if I could use the phrase, Western countries, have already worked together in a unity to let the Chinese, who are also an important part of AIIB, to agree to certain kinds of standards and agreements right before AIIB is founded. Do you agree with this kind of perspectives?
You're referring to some comments that some Western countries who joined this bank have ordered this institution.
That was the word.
Because of their role in the setting up of the institution, in the process of the AIIB's founding. Nothing could be further from the truth. Let me tell you this. China is the biggest shareholder and will remain the biggest shareholder. Before China floated the idea of having this bank, China told the whole world, probably early in the days, we may be holding 50% of the shares of this institution, because China did not expect there were so many countries joining. Now, if you were the biggest shareholder, do you allow somebody to change your ideas about setting this bank? Do you allow this bank to be completely different what you imagine it should be? Of course not. I was involved in this whole process. We had a clear idea of what this bank should be. You want to join? Welcome. You want to change this bank to something completely different? Sorry. Here is the door. We make it very much clear at the very beginning. This bank should be the first-class institution with the 21st century governance. We even had the ambition to have this bank as a role model of multilateral development institutions. We will not allow this bank to be set up completely different from our ideas. However, we were willing to listen to good suggestions, ideas, which can perfect our conceptualization. We couldn't thought about each and every details, but we were very clear. For instance, this bank should be lean, not build up the bureaucracy. That's why we insisted there shouldn't be resident board. There shouldn't be. As some people argued we should have the resident board like what World Bank or some other institution. We said no, absolutely not. No compromise on this issue. You know, in this first year, we can save $20 million US.
Just on this alone?
Just because we don't have this resident board. And we have the corporate secretariat, which keeps the board informed of what's going on in this institution. They were fully informed as if they were right on the premises of this bank. So it should be lean, and we follow the business line. We won't have this country-focused approach. We follow the business line. We could save more people. Professionals would not be locked up in any country or any region. They will be fully fungible. Okay, they can move from country A to country B to country C. We could have probably 1/3 of the staff doing the 100 people's job in other institutions. This bank should be clean, zero tolerance of corruption. As you see, we have set up a very good system, procurement system, corporate procurement system, and all the procurement policies applied to all the projects we finance. So we were very clear about the shaping of the bank. But certainly we have benefited from all the good suggestions, ideas that permeated the whole process of negotiation. But fundamentally, AIIB is the bank as we envisioned.
Even from 50% to 30%.
Now, this is our idea. Because if you don't have the money, we put up the money. If all countries come in, we reduce our shareholding to accommodate more countries. Now, when we work on the European countries, do you think I tell them, this is our bank? And they said, no, we want to shape it. And I said, you're welcome. Is that true? No, I tell them, this is our bank. This is the bank we design, we imagine, we will build, we will run. And they told me, it's a good idea, we will join. So tell those people who have this kind of nonsense.
You have your points made very clear. So let's move to another point. You have a lot of already permanent founding members of AIIB. As you said, record-breaking, impressive. Also, a lot of observing countries interested in knowing where this organization is going to see whether they want to join or not. But Mr. Jin, if I could point out, you still lack of many important members of the G7.
What do you mean by many? How do you define many?
For example, Japan. For example,
Japan
the United
is many?
States. For example, Canada.
I don't think you're right. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Maybe we don't have the same, mathematics.
We have the same mathematics.
I would say.
But what about them? What about them?
Only a few countries are not members. These countries are systemically important countries. Okay. But we have shareholders who represent all the continents, okay, geographically distributed. So we have sufficient number of countries, big or small, systemically important or otherwise, who could render legitimacy to this institution.
Of course.
Okay. Whether some other countries are not members, that does not affect the legitimacy of this institution, of the international institution. So not many, only a few.
But what about the impact?
Very negligible.
All right, let me quote you, Mr. Jin. You said the other day about the U.S. opposition to AIIB and also their reluctance to join this organization for the moment. You said this, quote, the U.S. risks counterfeiting its international relevance, and you also warned the U.S. that, quote, history has never set any precedent that an empire is capable of governing the world forever, end of quote. Those are all very charismatic comments coming from you, Mr. Jin, but many are saying, are you being political?
I'm very pleased to hear that very senior officials in the U.S. government are very positive about this institution because they have watched the entire process of setting up this bank, and they have also watched the way we manage this institution. I think this is a very responsible attitude toward this institution. You should allow people to have some questions. You should allow people to be a little bit skeptics when they were not fully aware of what you intend to do. So I appreciate the position of the U.S. senior officials because they call a spade a spade. They know we set up a very good governance structure. They know we are transparent, and they know the way we operate this bank. So it's very gratifying to see that the U.S. government officials encourage the World Bank to work with us. They encourage the U.S. nationals to work in our institution. Indeed, we have universal procurement, we have universal recruitment, which certainly make it possible for us to have very close relationship with the United States. So regardless of the U.S. membership, we could have excellent cooperation with the United States. As I said on many other occasions, I hope why you did not quote me. I said this bank should be a new platform for the close cooperation between the United States and China. This bank should not be the new hotspot of confrontation between our two countries.
Before we go, you're having a lot of responsibilities on your hand and on your shoulder. So where can you get inspirations? From Shakespeare or elsewhere?
I read a lot in terms of history because history is important. History would teach you lessons. History would make you avoid the mistakes other people's made. Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, said, there are so many mistakes to be made in this world. Please don't repeat the same mistake twice. Okay, so I'm learning from the mistakes of some of the very successful managers of the private companies. We would run this institution in a very democratic way. We depend on the collective wisdom, not the sagacity of any individual manager. You know why? Because it's very much important. The success of any institution depends on the collective wisdom. Very often you see some people who build up an empire of a company only to see it crumble in his or her own hands. Why? Because some of the fatal mistakes they make. This is not going to happen to this institution because we have a completely different approach.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jin.
Thank you.
For being with us. Thank you for your time. Welcome back. You're watching a special program of World Insight. We are focusing today on AIIB. We took advantage of the opportunity not only having an inside-out look at AIIB, but also talking to members of the staff and many of the vice presidents, in addition to the Director General of the Integrity Department. We explored their shared visions and determination for the organization. Before we meet them, let's take a look at the governing structure of AIIB. AIIB's governance structure is composed of the Board of Governors, the Board of Directors, a President, and several Vice Presidents. The Board of Governors serves as the highest decision-making body. It consists of one governor and one alternate governor appointed by each member country. The Board of Directors, composed of 12 governors, each representing one or more member, is responsible for daily operations and tasks delegated to it by the Board of Governors. 9 of those members are from within the Asia-Pacific region, and 3 representing members outside the region. The president of AIIB is required to be a national of a regional member country who is elected by the Board of Governors and may serve up to 2 5-year terms. Vice presidents will be appointed by the Board of Directors on the recommendation of the president. With unprecedented reporting access to AIIB, we not only had an exclusive interview with AIIB President Jin Lichun, we also managed to unveil those not much publicized other key members of the senior management team and talk to them one by one. In the UK was the very first from quote-unquote the West or the developed economies who volunteered to join AIIB. Help us to shed some light on this process, how the decision was being made.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that the UK did take that decision, and in fact I was very much part of making that decision, because in the coalition government I was one of the foremost senior decision makers in that period. And what we saw was that China was bringing forward an idea which was a genuine attempt to create a new multilateral institution. The UK has long believed that many countries working together is the best way to try and solve international problems, economic problems like the need to invest in infrastructure. We, in common with many countries around the world, see investment in infrastructure as one of the important ways to tackle the challenges of building economic growth around the world.
But still, some might say developed economies are waiting to see what's going to happen. The United States, Canada, Japan, just to name a few. How important it is, from your perspective, for them to understand the importance of this organization and also to work as part of this organization?
But look, we have friendly relations with a whole lot of countries who haven't joined the banks. The Americans, for example, are now very positive about what the AIIB is trying to achieve. They see that this is an organization that has been set up with the highest standards of governance, whose policies match up to other institutions. You know, our environmental and social standards are the same as the World Banks or the Asian Development Banks, for example. And so we will always welcome those countries if they wish to join the bank in future. But in the end, that must be a decision for them as sovereign countries. And the AIIB is there to serve its members, whichever countries choose to join.
You transfer yourself from Asia Development Bank, ADB, to AIIB. Why?
It's a very good question. I don't think a new MDB is created every day. So it's a very unique opportunity to be, if you like, on the ground floor of a new building and to be with the management team, with the early pioneers, and to work with them to create something. So I think
be one of them.
And be one of them. So it's very exciting, and I feel very privileged to be part of that group. I worked with President Jin Lichun in ADB And so I'm familiar with his leadership style. And one thing which always struck me about his style was that he was always open to good ideas. And I think, that is what anybody wishes.
When did you work with him?
I worked with him in AIIB when he was there for 5 years as vice president. I was assistant general counsel at the time in the legal office. So I would go to all of his management committee meetings where projects were approved. So I got to work.
Remember one or two stories still with him?
I remember one case, where oil had just gone over 50.
Right.
And we were all shocked at $50 or $60. And he said,
Of course, that was that time.
That's right. And he said, it's still too cheap. Even at $100, it will be cheap. And it was almost prophetic, and after a few months, the price had shot up well over 100. So he has.
Did you go back to him and ask, how did you know?
So we joked about that later on, a few months later. But he was always inspirational, and he would always, he's able to bring his own experience into the room, which I think makes development real because of his own personal experiences. And of course, then he can make a point through literature as well. And I think that's always, it's a different perspective brought into a discussion.
But I think President Jin also is a fan of yours, I guess, because this is what he said in a press release when the CI unit was just being announced. He said this, it is going to play a fundamental role in the bank's governance. So seriously, it is the issue of governance. Of course, that's the issue the outside world is going to doing extra scrutiny about AIIB only because you're new.
Well, let me first make the point that we care about governance not because others care about governance.
Great point.
We care about governance because we believe governance is good. That good governance, a well-run institution, is a good institution. That's something we want. Also, we are a 21st century institution. So we need a 21st century governance structure. What I mean by this, if you look at all three elements, compliance, effectiveness, integrity, when the other MDBs were formed, these terms did not perhaps even exist in that sense. When you bring these new notions to an existing culture, it has difficulty. You have to manage people to accept those. We are at a very fortunate juncture position in AIIB that from day one we can take these policies, adapt these policies, and make them part of our DNA. And that is what truly will make this bank so different.
Of course, the reason why there are others who do not focus necessarily on infrastructure has a lot to do with the enormous amount of money infrastructure would need compared to other projects. So would that mean fewer projects of the AIIB compared to the others?
I think we see our comparative advantage in specializing in a few areas, and they will develop over time. One is the example of green infrastructure. So countries clearly are looking for ways for financing sustainable infrastructure that is resilient to climate change, financing green urban transport solutions, and AIIB can be an important player in this area. Then cross-border infrastructure. Many large projects are connections between countries to connect economies, to connect Europe and Asia, to connect different parts of Asia. These are very large investments for transport, for energy connections, water connections. Those projects are so large that a single bank can typically not afford to finance all the needs.
The problem of designing quality, implementable, sustainable project is a challenge for a multilateral development bank like AIIB.
Sometimes it's a lot of differences between developed economies and developing economies. And also between countries like where you're from originally, India, and also those in Central Asia. So how would you make sure that your experiences back in India and elsewhere will be able to apply to your current job?
We have also struggled a lot in providing infrastructure. When the developing country The resource, human resource is a problem. The financial resource is a problem. The capacity to devise a good project is also a problem. So they need support at all stages. So that's why we are going to create a special fund to provide assistance, technical assistance to developing countries, whereas in developed countries, their requirement is little sophisticated. They want high quality of infrastructure projects. I can give you by example, in Mongolia, they want a simple railway project to transport their goods to the market, simple railway. In India, we want a high-speed bullet train connecting between two different cities, which costs billions of dollars. The requirement between the developing country and the developing country has a vast change.
What is very important is what lessons and experience can we learn from some of the predecessors, for example, World Bank and AIIB?
I can give you an example. In my last posting in India, we wanted to develop huge 1,000 megawatt of solar park. So we approached AIIB to develop some land for a solar park, and the AIIB has agreed to provide finance for the evacuation of power. Since we have put up the power evacuation infrastructure, many private investors came and put up their projects, 25 megawatt, 50 megawatt, 10 megawatt.
Right.
So sometime a small help from the Multilateral Development Bank is able to leverage huge investment from the private sector, number one. The other lesson learned, which weaknesses from these multilateral development banks, but they take a lot of time. They have a lot of conditionalities, a lot of policies to be complied. One way it is good. But if we can expedite this approval process a little bit, then it is good for many people who are implementing the project. So AIIB will be faster enough in expediting giving various approval.
So how to make sure the system is really efficient?
We will have to apply technology. We will apply IT system that really, or basically will improve the quality of the transactions or maybe decision-making process. Right. Maybe we start with the transactions because some of the transactions is very, very standard. But if we do it manually compared to automatically using ID, much faster in ID.
During our discussions with the senior management, many of who hailed from different backgrounds, they were unfailingly enthusiastic about the prospects of this visionary startup. They also expressed excitement about Beijing, where AIIB is headquartered. Their eyes lit up. Take a look.
The experience of China over the last decades is so important and so unusual that the opportunity to live here and actually feel what Chinese development has brought about, how it has come about, is a wonderful professional and personal opportunity.
Beijing is a very great cultural city. I will enjoy. Of course, I will miss my homemade food, but in India, Chinese food is very famous. But the original Chinese food I am getting here, so I am not going to miss anything.
You have a lot of mosques in Beijing, so I can do a prayer on Fridays and so many recently halal food, Islamic food. So it's really convenient.
I actually come from the Highlands of Scotland, so I grew up in a very country area, you know, in a small village, in a small rural community in the UK. So London was already very big for me. Now Beijing is even bigger. So I'm also looking forward to getting to know some of the Chinese countryside. I like to hill walk and go fishing.
For me, my last 4 years were about worrying about China and AIIB. So I traveled a lot around China, looking at AIIB's projects in China. Of course, I will not be traveling so much in my official capacity around China. So I'll be sitting in Beijing and worrying about projects elsewhere and making sure that they conform to the highest principles which this bank has set for itself.
And that's our exclusive interview with senior management team members of AIIB, or Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. From an idea to an impressive multilateral development bank. It took a record-breaking less than 3 years. Many contribute that to the rising momentum of development in Asia and the enormous amount of needs of infrastructure in the region and worldwide. But in addition to speed, people will expect it to perform, and perform well. It will have to be lean, clean, and green. That's a lot of work and responsibility. And that is all the time we have for today. This is a special edition of our program. If you'd like to see more, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You will be able to find us. Or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again next time for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.